"Don't sign that," the maid's daughter whispered, and with those 3 words, she stopped the billionaire's empire from being stolen. She wasn't supposed to be there. An 11-year-old girl, hidden behind velvet curtains, watching the most powerful people in the city toast their fortune. At the head of the table sat Arthur Sterling, pen poised above a contract worth billions. Laughter rolled like thunder, fueled by greed and champagne. To everyone else, Lily was invisible, the maid's daughter in worn sneakers, a child meant to stay out of sight. But her sharp blue eyes caught something no one else noticed. Lily's eyes, sharp and trained by a soldier grandfather, caught something they'd all missed, a phrase buried in the fine print, a trap waiting to snap shut. Her heart pounded as she stepped out of the shadows, and with a trembling but steady voice, she shattered the silence. "Don't sign that." Just before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. We love seeing how far these stories reach. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. Now let's jump back in. Enjoy the story. She was a ghost in a world of glittering kings and queens. An 11-year-old girl stood in the shadows of the grand ballroom, a place she was never meant to be. She watched a billionaire lift a golden pen to sign a paper that would change everything, and knew she was the only one who saw the trap. Lily wasn't supposed to be there. Her mother, Sarah, had been clear. "You stay in the staff break room, Lilybug. Read your book. Don't wander." It was a simple rule, a necessary one. The break room was a small, windowless space tucked behind the cavernous kitchen. It smelled of bleach and tired feet, a world away from the symphony of clinking glasses and expensive perfume that drifted in from the gala. But the book was finished. It was an old one, a dog-eared copy of a war history her grandfather had given her before he passed. He'd been a colonel, a man who saw the world in patterns and strategies. "Look past the noise, Lily," he used to say, his voice a low, comforting rumble. "The real fight is never the one they show you. It's hidden in the quiet details, in the words they don't say." She had read the last page for the 3rd time. The quiet of the break room was no longer a comfort. It felt like a cage. She just wanted a glimpse. Just one peek at the world her mother worked so hard in. A world so impossibly bright and distant from their tiny apartment and bus stop mornings. She pushed the door open a crack. The hallway was a river of motion. Servers in starched black and white uniforms moved with practiced speed, their faces blank masks of professionalism. Lily made herself small, slipping between a rolling cart of desserts and a hurried waiter. She kept to the wall, her worn sneakers silent on the plush crimson carpet. She was good at being invisible. Her grandfather had taught her that, too. The best scout is the one no one knows is there. She found a spot behind a thick velvet curtain that separated the main hall from a service corridor. It was the perfect hiding place. Through a small gap, the ballroom unfolded before her like a fairy tale. Chandeliers dripped with light, casting a golden glow on the sea of people below. The women wore jewels that glittered like trapped stars, their dresses shimmering silks and satins. The men stood in sharp tuxedos, their laughter loud and confident. It was a beautiful, terrifying place. Lily's eyes searched for her mother. She saw her near the head table, her movements graceful and efficient as she refilled water glasses. Sarah's face was calm, but Lily knew the tension in her shoulders, the slight tightness around her eyes. It was the look she wore when rent was due, or when Lily needed new shoes they couldn't quite afford. To the people at that table, her mother was just a pair of hands, a part of the scenery. To Lily, she was the whole world. The head table was the center of this universe. At its helm sat a man who radiated a quiet power. Arthur Sterling. His name was whispered with a mix of fear and reverence. He had a mane of silver hair and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He wasn't smiling like the others. He looked tired, his gaze fixed on a sheaf of papers in front of him. A thick, important-looking document bound in dark leather. A man beside him, with a slick, oily smile and a watch that shone like a small sun, leaned in. "It's a masterpiece, Arthur. A legacy." His voice was smooth but carried an edge Lily didn't like. It was the sound of a salesman, not a friend. Another woman at the table, her neck draped in diamonds, let out a tinkling laugh. "To sealing the deal of the decade," she announced, raising her glass. Lily watched, her heart a little drum against her ribs. She didn't understand what a merger was, not really. But she understood the feeling in the room. It was thick with greed and ambition, emotions her grandfather had warned her about. Greed makes men blind, he told her, pointing to a chapter in his history book about a general who lost a war because he wanted one more chest of gold. It makes them walk right into the enemy's arms. It was then that a server, a young man with a nervous tremor in his hands, stumbled near the head table. A single glass of red wine tipped from his tray, splashing onto the pristine white tablecloth, just inches from the important contract. A collective gasp went through the table. The woman with the diamonds recoiled as if she'd been struck. "You clumsy oaf," she hissed, her voice sharp and cruel. "Do you have any idea how much this dress costs?" The young man's face went white. "I am so sorry, ma'am. It was an accident." The man with the shiny watch sneered. "An accident? People like you are an accident. You probably can't even afford the cleaning bill for that tablecloth, let alone her gown." The table chuckled, a low, ugly sound. Sarah, Lily's mother, immediately moved in. She placed a clean napkin over the stain, her movements swift and silent. "I'll take care of this," she said softly, her voice a calming balm in the sudden storm of cruelty. She gave the young server a quick, reassuring nod, a silent message to disappear. Mr. Sterling hadn't said a word. He just watched the exchange, his expression unreadable. But Lily saw his fingers tighten on the arm of his chair. Sarah finished her work and began to retreat, but the woman in diamonds wasn't finished. "You," she said, pointing a finger at Sarah. "See that this person is fired. I won't have my evening ruined by incompetence." Sarah froze. Her back was to Lily, but Lily could imagine her expression perfectly. The quiet dignity fighting against the raw fear of losing a job that kept them afloat. "Yes, ma'am," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. From her hiding spot, Lily felt a hot surge of anger. They didn't see her mother. They saw a uniform. They saw a mistake to be punished. They didn't see the way she hummed when she cooked, or how she'd stay up late helping Lily with her homework even when she was exhausted. The incident passed. The conversation resumed. The contract was pushed back to the center of the table. A sleek, gold-plated pen was produced and placed beside it. Mr. Sterling picked it up, his gaze still distant. He seemed unconvinced, hesitant. "Just sign it, Arthur," the man with the watch urged, his voice a little too eager. "Lock it in. We'll all be richer than kings." Mr. Sterling slowly uncapped the pen. The room seemed to hold its breath. Lily's focus narrowed, drawn to the document on the table. She was too far away to read it properly, but her eyes, trained by her grandfather to find details, caught something. A single phrase on the top page, written in a slightly different font. It was a small thing, an almost invisible inconsistency. Asset realignment protocol. The words meant nothing to her, but the way they were placed, tucked away, almost an afterthought, pricked at her memory. It reminded her of something her grandfather had shown her in one of his old army manuals. A section on deception. Sometimes, the enemy hides his true intentions in plain sight. "Lily," he had explained, his finger tracing a diagram of a Trojan horse. "They'll give you a gift, a beautiful, grand gesture. But they'll hide one small, deadly thing inside it. A word, a phrase, a single soldier. You have to look for the thing that doesn't belong." Lily looked at the contract, the grand gift, and then she looked at the phrase, the thing that didn't belong. Her heart started to pound harder. She didn't know what it meant, but a cold certainty washed over her. It was a trick. It was the soldier hidden inside the horse. Mr. Sterling held the pen over the signature line. The man with the watch was beaming, his teeth like a row of polished stones. The woman in diamonds was already sipping her champagne in victory. Lily's mind raced. Her mother's job, their apartment. Everything was so fragile. Getting involved would be a disaster. Sarah would be fired. They would be thrown out. She should stay hidden. She should be a good girl and do nothing. But her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. He wasn't a good man. She was just a little girl. But the words were the same. She saw her mother's tired face in her mind. She thought of the clumsy young server, his eyes wide with fear. She looked at the smug, cruel faces at the table, laughing as they prepared to swallow Mr. Sterling's company whole. She couldn't stay hidden. Before she even realized what she was doing, her body was moving. She slipped out from behind the curtain. Her steps were small and silent at first, then more determined. She walked past tables of astonished guests, their conversations faltering as they watched the small, blonde girl in a simple cotton dress and worn sneakers march toward the most powerful table in the room. The man with the watch saw her first. His smile vanished, replaced by a look of utter disbelief. What is this? Where did this child come from? Sarah turned, and her face went pale with terror. Lily, she gasped, her voice a strangled whisper. Go back. Now. But Lily didn't look at her mother. Her eyes were locked on Arthur Sterling. She reached the table just as the tip of his pen touched the paper. Her voice was small, but it cut through the murmuring of the room like a tiny, sharp blade. Don't sign that, she said. The world seemed to stop. The pen froze, hovering a millimeter above the paper. Every eye in the ballroom was on her. The silence that followed was absolute, a heavy blanket of shock and disbelief. It was broken by a single, harsh sound, the mocking laughter of the man with the shiny watch. Well, he boomed, turning to the table for an audience. It seems we have a new financial advisor in our midst. What's your name, little girl? Did you wander away from the daycare? The woman in diamonds chimed in, her voice dripping with venomous amusement. How adorable. She wants to play with the grown-ups. Is your mommy one of the kitchen staff? Did she let you out to see the pretty lights? She gestured vaguely towards Sarah, who stood frozen, her face a mask of horror. Lily's jaw tightened. She ignored them. Her gaze remained fixed on Mr. Sterling, who was looking at her not with anger, but with a strange, intense curiosity. His pen had not moved. What did you say? Mr. Sterling asked, his voice low and even. Before Lily could answer, Sarah rushed forward and gently took her daughter's arm. Mr. Sterling, sir, I am so sorry. Forgive her. She doesn't know what she's doing. She was supposed to be in the back. Sarah's grip on Lily's arm was trembling. Come on, Lilybug. We're leaving. But Lily stood her ground. She pulled her arm free, a small but firm gesture. I know what I'm doing, Mom. She looked back at the billionaire. I said, don't sign it. It's a trap. This time, the entire table erupted in laughter. It was a cruel, condescending sound that echoed through the vast room. Guests at nearby tables started whispering, pointing, their faces a mixture of amusement and disdain. A trap, the man with the watch sputtered, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. Listen to her. We have teams of the best lawyers in the country who drafted this, and a little girl in pigtails thinks it's a trap. This is priceless. A different man at the table, one with a thin mustache and beady eyes, leaned forward and squinted at Lily. Child, this document represents billions of dollars. It's about mergers and acquisitions. I highly doubt you can even spell acquisition. Go back to your coloring books. Lily's cheeks burned, but she held her ground. She remembered her grandfather's lessons on keeping a cool head when the enemy tried to rattle you. They use insults as weapons because they have no good arguments. She pointed a small, steady finger at the contract. Page 12, she said, her voice clear and unwavering. Under the heading Contingency Protocols, there's a line in there. Asset Realignment Protocol. The laughter died down, replaced by confused murmurs. The man with the slick smile, whose name was Marcus Thorne, scoffed. And what about it? It's standard legal language. Boilerplate. No, it isn't, Lily said. It's a Trojan horse. A ripple of confusion went through the table. The woman with the diamonds rolled her eyes. Oh, for heaven's sake. Now she's giving us a history lesson. Someone call her mother. Oh, wait. She smirked, glancing at Sarah, who looked as if the floor was about to swallow her whole. The hotel manager, a frantic, sweating man named Mr. Henderson, finally arrived, bustling toward the table. Mr. Sterling, my deepest apologies. There seems to have been a security lapse. I'll have the child removed immediately. He grabbed Lily's shoulder, his grip surprisingly strong. Come along, young lady. You've caused enough trouble. Let her go, Mr. Sterling said. His voice wasn't loud, but it had the unmistakable ring of command. Mr. Henderson's hand dropped from Lily's shoulder as if it had been burned. Every head turned to Mr. Sterling. He was no longer looking at Lily with curiosity. He was looking at her with piercing intensity. He hadn't laughed. Not once. Explain, he said, his eyes locked on hers. What do you mean, a Trojan horse? Lily took a breath, her small chest rising and falling. The whole world was watching her. Her mother was watching her, tears welling in her eyes. But in that moment, all she could hear was her grandfather's voice, calm and steady in her memory. The Trojan horse was a gift, Lily began, her voice gaining strength. The Greeks gave it to the city of Troy to make them think the war was over. It looked beautiful, a prize. So the Trojans pulled it inside their walls. They celebrated. But in the middle of the night, soldiers who were hidden inside the horse climbed out and opened the gates for the Greek army. By morning, Troy was destroyed. They lost everything because they accepted a beautiful gift without checking what was hidden inside. She paused, then looked directly at Marcus Thorne. That clause, the asset realignment protocol. It's the soldier in the horse. It looks harmless. It looks like standard language. But it isn't. My grandfather taught me. Thorne's smile was gone now, replaced by a tight, angry line. Your grandfather? And who is he? The CEO of a toy company. He was Colonel Thomas Grant of the 75th Ranger Regiment, Lily said, her chin lifting slightly. He was a hero, and he taught me that some words are weapons. That protocol doesn't mean what you think it does. It's a trigger. In military code, realignment means to transfer control to a new authority without a fight. It means surrender. That clause says that 30 days after you sign, all of your company's primary assets, your factories, your patents, everything, they get realigned to the new parent company. They aren't merging with you. They are gutting you. You're pulling the horse inside your walls, Mr. Sterling. A stunned, absolute silence fell over the room. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet. The guests stared, their mocking smiles frozen on their faces. Sarah looked at her daughter with wide, disbelieving eyes. Marcus Thorne's face had turned a blotchy, unhealthy red. That is the most absurd, ridiculous, insane thing I have ever heard. She's a child making up stories. But his voice lacked its earlier confidence. It was shrill, defensive. The man with the thin mustache was already fumbling with his copy of the contract, his hands shaking slightly as he flipped through the pages. Page 12, page 12. Mr. Sterling did not look at the contract. He didn't need to. He kept his eyes on Lily. He saw no deceit in her expression, no childish fantasy. He saw a deep, unwavering conviction. A conviction that reminded him of the honest, straightforward men he'd known in his youth. Men who said what they meant and meant what they said. Men like a soldier. Get my legal counsel on the phone. Now, Mr. Sterling said to his assistant, a quiet woman who had been standing by the wall, unnoticed until now. Read him that specific clause. Page 12. The Asset Realignment Protocol. Ask him for the most aggressive interpretation possible under international maritime law, not corporate law. Tell him it's a hostile takeover scenario. Thorne shot to his feet. Arthur, this is a circus. You can't be taking strategic advice from a maid's daughter. We've been working on this deal for a year. Our lawyers vetted everything. Your lawyers, Marcus, not mine, Sterling replied, his voice cold as ice. He waved a dismissive hand. Sit down. The girl has the floor. The assistant was already on the phone, her back to the room, whispering urgently. The man with the mustache found the page, his finger tracing the line of text. His face, which had been smug, was now slowly draining of all color. The woman in diamonds looked from the man's pale face to Thorne's furious one. The smirk had long since vanished from her lips, replaced by a dawning look of horror. The whispers around the ballroom were no longer amused. They were frantic, confused, anxious. Lily stood her ground, her hands clasped behind her back, just as her grandfather had taught her to stand when addressing a superior officer. She had done what she had to do. The rest was out of her hands. She felt a small hand slip into hers and looked down to see her mother, her face streaked with silent tears, her eyes filled not with fear anymore, but with a fierce, overwhelming pride. The assistant finished her call and walked back to the table, her face ashen. She leaned down and whispered something in Mr. Sterling's ear. Lily couldn't hear the words, but she saw the effect they had. A muscle in Arthur Sterling's jaw clenched. His eyes, which had been sharp and calculating, now blazed with a cold, pure fury. The last bit of warmth drained from his expression, leaving the hardened face of a man who had just been shown the knife at his own throat. He looked across the table at Marcus Thorne, his gaze so intense it seemed to have a physical weight. Thorne, who had been blustering and protesting, shrank back in his chair, a sheen of sweat suddenly visible on his forehead. The oily charm was gone, stripped away to reveal the terrified rat underneath. It seems the colonel's daughter is a better lawyer than the entire firm of Donahue, Swain and Partners, Mr. Sterling said, his voice dangerously quiet. My counsel confirms it. The language is archaic, predatory. A legal loophole so obscure it hasn't been used successfully since the shipping wars of the 1970s. It's a corporate kill switch. In 30 days, I wouldn't have just lost control. My company would cease to exist. Every asset, every share, every employee's pension fund, transferred. Gone. A collective gasp swept through the room. The reality of what had almost happened settled over them. Billions of dollars, an entire empire, the livelihoods of thousands of people, had rested on the tip of that golden pen. Saved by the warning of a child. The woman in diamonds looked like she was going to be sick. The man with the mustache stared at the contract in his hands as if it were a venomous snake. Mr. Sterling slowly, deliberately, put the cap back on his pen. The click echoed in the silent room. Then he picked up the thick, leather-bound contract. For a moment, he held it in his hands, looking at it with utter contempt. And then, with a single, powerful motion, he tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper was like a gunshot. It was a sound of finality, of war declared. He ripped it again, and then again, letting the confetti of his near ruin flutter onto the table. He stood up, his tall frame casting a long shadow over the ruined deal. His eyes swept over the stunned faces at his table. Marcus, he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. You have 60 seconds to get out of this building. If I ever see your face again, if I ever hear your name connected with any business in this city, I will spend the rest of my life ensuring you never earn another dollar. I will not sue you. I will erase you. Thorne scrambled to his feet, his chair screeching against the floor. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He turned and practically fled, stumbling over himself in his haste to escape the ballroom. Mr. Sterling's gaze then fell on the woman with the diamonds and the man with the mustache. As for the two of you, he said, his voice dripping with disgust, you sat here, ready to feast on the scraps of my life's work. Your shares in my company are now forfeit. My office will contact you in the morning to arrange the buyback. At 1 cent on the dollar. Consider that a lesson in loyalty. They stared at him, their faces a mixture of shock and devastation. They had not just lost a potential fortune, they had lost their actual one. The ballroom was in chaos. People were standing up, talking in hushed, urgent tones. The grand party was over. The manager, Mr. Henderson, stood by the wall, wringing his hands, looking utterly lost. Through it all, Mr. Sterling ignored them. He turned his attention back to the one person in the room who mattered. He looked down at Lily, who was still standing beside her mother, her small hand clutched in Sarah's. The fury in his eyes softened, replaced by something else. All gratitude. He knelt, bringing himself down to her level. The powerful billionaire, who had just dismantled his enemies without raising his voice, was now on one knee before a little girl in a faded dress. Colonel Thomas Grant's granddaughter, he said, his voice filled with a respect that was more valuable than all the money in that room. He would be very proud of you. Lily felt a lump form in her throat. She could only nod, her eyes suddenly bright with unshed tears. You did more than save my company tonight, Mr. Sterling continued, his voice low so only she and Sarah could hear. You reminded an old man what integrity looks like. I am in your debt, a debt I fully intend to repay. He looked at Sarah, whose tears were now flowing freely. Ma'am, he said, with a deference that shocked her. Your daughter is remarkable. I can only assume she gets it from her mother. You will no longer be cleaning rooms at this hotel. Starting tomorrow, you will have a new position, executive assistant, in my personal office. Your salary will be 5 times what you make here, with full benefits and a housing allowance. Your only job will be to ensure your daughter has everything she needs to become the person she is destined to be. Sarah could only stare, her mouth opening and closing silently. She was in shock, unable to process the sudden, seismic shift in their lives. From the terror of imminent firing to this impossible miracle. Mr. Sterling stood up. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple, elegant business card. He handed it to Sarah. My personal number. A car will be sent for you at 8 o'clock in the morning. We have much to discuss. He then looked at Lily one last time. He didn't smile, not exactly, but the look in his eyes was warmer than any smile she had ever seen. Thank you, Lily Grant, he said simply. And with that, he turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving a trail of stunned silence, shattered careers, and one small, forever changed family in his wake. The ride home was a blur. Lily and Sarah didn't take the bus that night. A sleek, black car, the kind Lily had only ever seen in movies, was waiting for them at the hotel's service entrance. The driver, a kind man with gentle eyes, held the door open for them and didn't say a word as they sank into the soft leather seats. The city lights slid past the tinted windows, painting streaks of gold and red across Sarah's stunned face. She hadn't spoken since they left the ballroom. She just held Lily's hand, her grip tight, as if she were afraid Lily might disappear. Lily rested her head on her mother's shoulder, the adrenaline from the confrontation slowly draining away, leaving a deep, bone-weary exhaustion in its place. The grand ballroom, the angry faces, Mr. Sterling's blazing eyes, it all felt like a dream. A strange, terrifying, wonderful dream. When the car pulled up to their small apartment building, with its peeling paint and flickering porch light, it looked like a visitor from another planet. The driver walked them to their door, waiting patiently as Sarah fumbled with the keys. "Mr. Sterling wanted to ensure you arrived home safely," he said, his voice a soft rumble. "The car will be here for you at 8 tomorrow morning, ma'am." Ma'am. Sarah had never been called ma'am with such genuine respect in her life. She could only nod, still speechless. Inside their tiny apartment, the familiar scent of lemon cleaner and old books wrapped around them like a blanket. It was their home, their safe harbor. But tonight, it felt different. It felt small. The walls, which had always felt cozy, now seemed to be closing in. Sarah finally let go of Lily's hand. She walked to the small kitchen and poured a glass of water, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she were testing to see if the world was still solid. She took a long drink, then leaned against the counter, closing her eyes. "Lily Bug," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What did you do?" It wasn't an accusation. It was a question filled with a profound, earth-shattering awe. "I did what Grandpa would have done," Lily said softly, walking over to her mother. "I saw something wrong, and I said something." Sarah opened her eyes and looked at her daughter. Really looked at her. She saw the blonde hair and the familiar blue eyes, but she also saw something new. A strength, a clarity, a wisdom that had no place in an 11-year-old girl. It was the spirit of her father, Colonel Thomas Grant, looking back at her. A man who had faced down enemies on battlefields, now living on in the heart of his granddaughter in a war fought with words in a billionaire's ballroom. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes again, but this time they were not tears of fear. She slid to the floor and pulled Lily into her arms, burying her face in her daughter's hair. She held on tight, rocking her back and forth. "Oh, Lily," she cried, her voice thick with a dozen emotions. "I was so scared, so proud, so scared." They stayed like that for a long time, two small figures huddled together on a worn linoleum floor, their world having been cracked wide open and rearranged into a shape they did not yet recognize. Sleep did not come easily that night. For Sarah, it was a whirlwind of anxieties and hopes. A new job, a new life. Could she do it? Could she navigate a world of corporate sharks after a lifetime of quiet service? For Lily, sleep was a landscape of her grandfather's words, of Trojan horses and hidden enemies. She had won a battle, but she knew, with a certainty she couldn't explain, that the war wasn't over. People like Marcus Thorne didn't just disappear. They regrouped. They planned. And they never, ever forgave. The next morning, the black car was waiting as promised. Punctually at 8 o'clock, their neighbors peered through their blinds, their faces etched with confusion at the sight of the gleaming vehicle parked in front of their humble building. Lily and Sarah walked out, Sarah in her best, and only, blouse, Lily in her school dress. They felt like actors in a play they hadn't rehearsed. The drive was different this time. It wasn't a dreamlike blur. It was a journey into a new reality. They left their familiar neighborhood of laundromats and corner stores and drove towards the city's gleaming heart. The buildings grew taller, their glass and steel skins reflecting the morning sun. The people on the sidewalks moved with a different purpose, their suits sharp, their strides confident. The car pulled up to a skyscraper that seemed to pierce the clouds. Sterling Enterprises was written in bold, silver letters above the revolving doors. This was where her mother was going to work. This was Mr. Sterling's kingdom. A woman with a kind smile and a clipboard was waiting for them in the marble lobby. "Mrs. Grant?" Miss Grant. Welcome. My name is Eleanor. I'm Mr. Sterling's chief of staff. He's asked me to take care of you today. Eleanor led them to a private elevator. As they ascended, the city spread out below them like a map. Mr. Sterling is in a board meeting, Eleanor explained. He asked me to get you settled first. Sarah, your office is on the executive floor. And Lily, we've arranged a tour of the Sterling Preparatory Academy. It's one of the best schools in the country. We've taken the liberty of scheduling an enrollment interview for you this afternoon. Sarah's head was spinning. A new office. A new school for Lily. A private, elite school she could never have afforded in 1,000 lifetimes. It was all too much, too fast. I don't know what to say, she stammered. Say you'll accept, Eleanor said gently. Mr. Sterling is a man of his word. He believes in paying his debts. And he believes your daughter is an exceptional young woman who deserves an exceptional education. Sarah's new office was not an office. It was a suite. It had a large mahogany desk, a soft leather chair, and a window that overlooked the entire city. It was bigger than their whole apartment. On the desk was a welcome packet containing security passes, a company credit card, and a folder labeled housing allowance. While Sarah tried to absorb the sheer scale of her new life, Eleanor took Lily to a different car. The Sterling Preparatory Academy was a world unto itself. It looked like a castle, with old stone buildings covered in ivy and sprawling green lawns where students in crisp uniforms sat reading under ancient oak trees. Lily felt a familiar pang of being an outsider. Her simple dress and worn sneakers stood out like a sore thumb. The other children looked at her with curiosity, their eyes lingering on her clothes before flicking away. It was the ballroom all over again, just with younger faces. The headmistress, a stern-looking woman named Mrs. Gable, interviewed her in a book-lined office that smelled of old paper and furniture polish. She looked at Lily's public school records with a barely concealed sniff of disapproval. Your grades are adequate, Miss Grant, she said, her voice dry as dust. But Sterling Prep is demanding. Our students come from the finest families. They are accustomed to a certain level of academic rigor. Lily met her gaze evenly. I like to read, she said simply. Especially history. Mrs. Gable raised a skeptical eyebrow. Is that so? Tell me then, what is the strategic importance of the Battle of Thermopylae? It was a test. A dart thrown to see if she would flinch. Lily didn't. She thought of her grandfather, of the countless hours they had spent with his books spread across their small living room floor. It wasn't about winning, Lily said, her voice clear and steady. The Spartans knew they couldn't win. They were outnumbered 100 to 1. It was about sacrifice, about buying time. Their stand at the hot gates delayed the Persian army just long enough for the rest of Greece to mobilize its forces. It showed that a few, committed people could stand against a massive power and change the course of history. It wasn't a military victory. It was a moral one. Mrs. Gable stared at her. The stern mask on her face cracked, replaced by a look of genuine surprise. She looked down at Lily's file, then back at the small, blonde girl sitting so calmly before her. She had expected a charity case, an obligation forced upon the school by its wealthy benefactor, Mr. Sterling. She had not expected this. I see, she said, her tone shifting from condescending to respectful. Welcome to Sterling Prep, Miss Grant. I believe you will do quite well here. When Lily returned to her mother's new office, she found Sarah staring out the window, a look of quiet determination on her face. She had spent the last few hours reading through company reports, her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked up as Lily entered. How was it? Sarah asked, a hint of worry in her voice. I think I'll like it, Lily said. They have a big library. A small smile touched Sarah's lips. Good. She held up a thick folder. And I think I'll like it here, too. It's just reading reports and organizing schedules. It's not so different from managing a household budget and a cleaning rota. It's just bigger, with more zeros. In that moment, Lily saw the same strength in her mother that her mother had seen in her the night before. They were Grants. They were survivors. They adapted. Later that afternoon, they were summoned to Mr. Sterling's office. It was at the very top of the skyscraper, a vast, circular room with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a 360-degree view of the world. It felt like standing on top of a mountain. Mr. Sterling was not at his desk. He was standing by the window, looking down at the city he had built. He turned as they entered, and the fatigue Lily had seen at the gala was gone. His eyes were clear and sharp. "Lily," he said, and his voice held a genuine warmth. "Mrs. Gable called me. She was impressed. She said you taught her a thing or two about strategy." He smiled, "A rare and powerful thing. I am not surprised." He then looked at Sarah. "And you, Sarah? Eleanor tells me you've already identified 3 inefficiencies in my senior staff's travel budget. It seems an eye for detail runs in the family." Sarah blushed. "I was just looking at the numbers, sir." "Please," he said, gesturing to the chairs in front of his desk. "Call me Arthur." He sat down, and the warmth was replaced by a serious, focused intensity. "I did not bring you up here just to offer pleasantries. I brought you here because we have a problem. Marcus Thorne and his partners have not gone away. Losing the merger was a humiliation for them. They will not let it go. They have started a whisper campaign. They are telling the market that I am unstable, that my judgment is failing, that I am taking business advice from a child." He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the polished surface of his desk. "They are trying to attack my credibility to drive my stock price down. It's a different kind of warfare, not a frontal assault, but a campaign of poison and rumors. The modern Trojan horse." He looked directly at Lily. "I can fight them on the financial front, but I need help. I need someone who sees the things others miss. Someone who looks for the soldier hidden inside the gift. Your grandfather taught you well, Lily. He taught you how to see the battlefield. This building, this company, it is now a battlefield. I want you to be my secret weapon." He wasn't talking to her like a child. He was talking to her like a general addressing his most trusted advisor. "What do you need me to do?" Lily asked, her voice as serious as his. "I need you to listen," Arthur said. "I need you to watch. People will underestimate you. They will ignore you. They will say things in front of you that they would never say in front of me. I want you to be my eyes and ears. Your mother will have access to every meeting, every document. I want the 2 of you to work together. Read everything. Listen to everyone. Look for the phrase that doesn't belong. Look for the detail that's out of place. Find their next attack before it happens." It was an impossible request. To place the fate of a multi-billion-dollar company in the hands of a maid and her 11-year-old daughter. It was madness. But Arthur Sterling was not a man who believed in conventional wisdom. He believed in what he saw. And he saw a lineage of integrity and strategic brilliance sitting in the 2 simple chairs before him. "We can do that," Sarah said, and there was no hesitation in her voice. She looked at her daughter, and Lily nodded. "We can," Lily affirmed. A new battle had begun, not in a grand ballroom, but in the quiet, carpeted hallways of corporate power. The enemy was no longer just a few greedy men at a table. It was a shadow, a rumor, a whisper in the dark. And Lily Grant, the colonel's granddaughter, was once again on the front lines. The weeks that followed were a quiet storm. On the surface, life for Sarah and Lily settled into a new, unbelievable rhythm. They moved out of their cramped apartment and into a bright, spacious condominium in a safe, quiet neighborhood, paid for by the housing allowance that was more than Sarah's old yearly salary. For the first time, Lily had her own room, a desk to do her homework on, and a window that overlooked a park instead of a brick wall. Sarah, true to her nature, excelled in her new role. The world of corporate administration, which seemed so intimidating from the outside, was simply a matter of organization and attention to detail. These were skills she had honed over a lifetime of managing tight budgets, complex cleaning schedules, and the beautiful, chaotic life of a single mother. She was polite, efficient, and missed nothing. The other executive assistants, who had initially viewed her with suspicion, soon came to respect her quiet competence. She never spoke of the gala. She didn't have to. The story had become a legend in the halls of Sterling Enterprises, a whispered tale of the maid who saved the company. Lily, too, found her footing at Sterling Prep. The initial snobbery from some students faded when they realized she was not easily intimidated. She was quiet, but not shy. She was a listener, an observer. In a school filled with the loud and the privileged, her stillness was its own kind of power. And as Mrs. Gable had predicted, she thrived. Her mind, sharpened by her grandfather's unconventional lessons, saw history not as a list of dates, but as a series of strategic puzzles. It saw math not as numbers, but as patterns. But beneath this calm surface, the secret war continued. Every evening, after dinner in their new sunlit kitchen, Sarah and Lily would sit at the table with copies of the day's meeting minutes, financial reports, and internal memos. It was Lily's new homework. Sarah would read them aloud, her finger tracing the lines of text, while Lily listened, her eyes closed, picturing the words as pieces on a chessboard. They were looking for the Trojan horse. Most of it was just noise. Sales projections, marketing strategies, human resource updates. But they listened to it all, just as her grandfather had taught her. You have to listen to all the chatter to hear the one important signal. The first signal came from the most boring place imaginable, a weekly logistics meeting. Sarah had attended, taking notes for Arthur. The meeting was a dry recitation of shipping schedules and warehouse inventories. At one point, the head of logistics, a harried man named Mr. Davies, mentioned a minor delay. "We've got a small snag at the port of Malacca," he'd said, sighing. "Some new local regulations are holding up our shipment of microprocessors. It's a headache, but we'll reroute. Should only set us back a week." No one else in the meeting paid it any mind. It was a common problem in a global company. A single shipment, a week's delay. It was a drop in the ocean. Sarah had written it down, just as she wrote everything down. That evening, as she read her notes to Lily, she almost skipped over it. And then Mr. Davies talked about a shipping delay in Malacca, something about microprocessors. "Wait," Lily said, her eyes snapping open. "Say that again." "A delay at the port of Malacca," Sarah repeated, confused. "It's nothing, Lilybug. Just a small logistics issue." "Where did Grandpa say the weak point of any army was?" Lily asked, sitting up straighter. Sarah paused, thinking back to the stories her father used to tell. "The supply line," she answered. "He always said an army marches on its stomach. You don't have to defeat the soldiers if you can stop their food and bullets from reaching them." "Sterling Enterprises is the army," Lily said, a spark of excitement in her eyes. "The products are the soldiers. But the microprocessors, they're the bullets. Without them, you can't build anything. The whole company stops." Sarah looked at her daughter, a chill running down her spine. "But it's just one shipment, Lily. A 1-week delay." "The first shot in a battle is always small," Lily countered, her voice taking on the unnerving certainty of an old soul. "It's a test. To see if anyone is watching. Who owns the shipping company, Mom?" The question hung in the air. It took Sarah 2 days of discreet digging through the company's vast network of suppliers to find the answer. The company was a small, regional carrier called Oceanic Transit. They were new, and had won the contract by underbidding their larger, more established competitors. On paper, they were clean. But Sarah, guided by Lily's instinct, didn't stop there. She used the research tools her new position gave her access to. She looked into the ownership of Oceanic Transit. It was a holding company based in the Caribbean. A dead end. But she kept digging, fueled by coffee and a mother's fierce desire to protect the new life her daughter had given them. She cross-referenced the holding company's board of directors. And there it was. A single name. A man who sat on the board of a dozen obscure companies. A man whose sister was married to Marcus Thorne. It was thin. A thread so fine it was almost invisible. But it was there. The soldier was in the horse. They took their findings to Arthur Sterling. They met in his vast office, the city lights beginning to twinkle below them as dusk fell. He listened intently, his face unreadable, as Sarah laid out the documents and Lily explained her theory. "They aren't attacking the stock price with rumors anymore," Lily concluded. "That was just a distraction. They're attacking the supply line. They'll create a series of small, unfortunate delays. 1 week here, 10 days there. Each one will look like a normal business problem. But altogether, they will cripple our production for the fourth quarter, right before the holidays. The company will miss its earnings forecast. The stock will collapse. And then they'll be able to buy it for pennies on the dollar." When she finished, the office was silent. Arthur stared at the documents, at the thin, undeniable line connecting a tiny shipping company in Asia to the man he had thrown out of the gala. He looked up at Lily, and the awe he'd felt that night returned tenfold. "He's not just trying to ruin me," Arthur said, his voice a low growl. "He's trying to do it with my own money. He's using our own supply contracts against us." He shook his head in grudging admiration. "It's a brilliant, insidious strategy, and no one would have ever seen it. They would have blamed the logistics department, the market, bad luck. No one would have looked for a coordinated attack." He stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "They made one mistake," he said, looking down at the river of headlights flowing through the city streets. "They underestimated a grant. He turned back, a look of cold, hard resolve on his face. "We are not going to stop them," he said, and for a second, Sarah's heart sank. "We're going to let them walk right into the trap. We're going to watch them build their whole plan around this strategy." And at the last possible moment, he looked at Lily. "We are going to cut their supply line." The counteroffensive was planned in absolute secrecy. Arthur, Sarah, Lily, and a small, fiercely loyal team of executives were the only ones who knew. They didn't cancel the contract with Oceanic Transit. Instead, they secretly chartered their own cargo planes. They began stockpiling microprocessors and other key components in hidden warehouses, creating a shadow supply chain. Outwardly, they played the part of the fool. Mr. Davies in logistics was instructed to complain loudly about the delays. Arthur himself mentioned in a carefully leaked email that he was concerned about fourth-quarter production. They baited the hook, and Marcus Thorne, blinded by his arrogance and greed, swallowed it whole. While the secret war ramped up, Lily faced her own battles at Sterling Prep. The initial respect she had earned was tested. A boy in her history class, the son of a prominent banker who had been friends with Marcus Thorne, began to challenge her. His name was Julian, and he had his father's smug confidence. "You think you're so smart," he sneered one day after Lily had answered a difficult question about Roman military tactics. "My dad says your mom is just a secretary, and you only got in here because old man Sterling felt sorry for you." Lily packed her books, her movements calm and deliberate. "My mother is an executive assistant," she said, not looking at him. "And my grandfather was a colonel. He taught me that loud people are usually the most afraid." "Afraid? Of you?" Julian laughed. "That's ridiculous. I didn't say you were afraid of me," Lily replied, finally turning to face him. Her blue eyes were steady. "I just said you were loud." She walked away, leaving him standing there, his face red with anger and confusion. She hadn't won by fighting back. She had won by refusing to fight on his terms. It was another one of her grandfather's lessons. Control the terrain, and you control the battle. The day of the attack finally came. It was the week before the quarterly earnings call. Marcus Thorne and his allies had been buying up put options on Sterling stock, a financial tool that was essentially a massive bet the price would go down. They had gambled billions, confident that the news of a production collapse would make them a fortune. The head of logistics, Mr. Davies, burst into Arthur's office, feigning a panic he did not feel. "It's a catastrophe, Arthur. Oceanic Transit just declared a force majeure event. A labor strike. Our entire shipment of processors is stranded. And 2 other key suppliers just reported factory shutdowns. We're dead in the water. Production will halt by Friday." The news leaked to the market, just as Thorne had planned. The stock began to wobble. The financial news channels lit up with worried commentators. Thorne and his cronies watched from their offices, their smiles predatory, ready to get rich from the ruins. But then, Arthur Sterling called an emergency press conference. He stood at a podium, the camera lights flashing in his eyes, a picture of calm confidence. "There are rumors," he began, his voice booming through the speakers, "that Sterling Enterprises is facing a catastrophic production failure. These rumors are false." He clicked a button, and the screen behind him lit up with images of bustling factories, of workers assembling products at a record pace. "Thanks to a forward-thinking logistical strategy, we anticipated potential disruptions in the global supply chain. Months ago, we established a secondary, redundant supply line. Our production has not been affected. In fact, it has accelerated." He clicked the button again. The screen now showed a complex web of shell corporations and bank transfers, the invisible thread that Sarah and Lily had first uncovered. At the center of the web was the face of Marcus Thorne. "These rumors were not an accident," Arthur declared, his voice like thunder. "They were part of a coordinated, malicious, and illegal attempt at market manipulation designed to defraud our company and our shareholders. We have turned over our evidence to the federal authorities. I have a feeling some of my former colleagues will be trading their expensive suits for a different kind of uniform." The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The stock market, which had been dipping, suddenly reversed course. Sterling stock didn't just recover. It soared to an all-time high as investors rewarded the company's brilliant resilience. Marcus Thorne and his partners were ruined. Their massive bet had backfired, wiping them out completely. Within the hour, federal agents were at their doors. Their pictures were splashed across every news channel, No longer smiling predators, but pale, terrified men in handcuffs. They had walked right into the trap. That evening, Arthur, Sarah, and Lily stood in the circular office, watching the news reports on a large screen. They didn't cheer. They didn't celebrate. They just watched as the consequences of greed and arrogance played out in real time. "He taught you well, Colonel," Arthur said quietly, looking at Lily with profound respect. "You didn't just see the first shot. You saw the entire campaign before it even began." He walked over to a small, ornate box on a side table. He opened it and took out a heavy, bronze medal. It was old, worn from a lifetime of being cherished. "This was my father's," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. "He was a captain in the Second World War. He received it for exceptional strategic acumen under fire. He believed, as your grandfather did, that the sharpest weapon is the mind. I can think of no one who deserves it more." He pressed the medal into Lily's small hand. It was heavy and cool to the touch. It was a piece of history, a symbol of a legacy she now shared. Lily looked from the medal to Arthur's kind eyes, and then to her mother, who was beaming with a pride so bright it could have lit up the entire city. She had not asked for this life. She had not asked for these battles. But she had faced them. She had stood her ground, not with shouting or with anger, but with quiet truth and the lessons of a good man. And that, she was beginning to understand, was the most powerful strategy of all. Life, after the storm, became a different kind of quiet. The explosions of the press conference and the subsequent arrests faded, replaced by the steady, day-to-day rhythm of building a new world. The bronze medal wasn't a trophy Lily displayed, it was a touchstone. She kept it in the pocket of her school blazer, its cool weight a silent reminder of her grandfather, of the battle they had won, and of the person she was meant to be. Years passed. The city skyline changed, but the view from Arthur Sterling's office remained the same. Sarah Grant, once the invisible maid, became one of the most respected figures at Sterling Enterprises. She was never loud, never sought the spotlight, but her influence was undeniable. She was Arthur's gatekeeper, his confidant, his most trusted advisor. She understood the heart of the company because she had seen it at its most vulnerable. She knew every department, every manager, not by their title, but by their character. She could spot a hint of deception in a budget proposal with the same unerring accuracy that she could once spot a smudge on a wine glass. Arthur Sterling grew older, his silver hair turning a soft white, but his eyes never lost their sharpness. He had become something more than a boss to Sarah, and more than a benefactor to Lily. He was family. He attended Lily's school plays, sat in the front row at her debate club championships, and listened with rapt attention as she explained the intricate politics of the Peloponnesian War. He had no children of his own. His company had been his only heir. But now he had two. He established the Colonel Thomas Grant Scholarship for Strategic Studies, a foundation that would fund the education of bright, underprivileged children who saw the world not just as it was, but as it could be. Lily was the first chairperson of its youth advisory board. Lily grew from a serious little girl into a thoughtful young woman. The halls of Sterling Prep, which had once seemed so intimidating, became her training ground. She learned that the world was full of Julians, loud, insecure boys who used their fathers' names as shields. She also learned that for every Julian, there was a quiet, overlooked person in the corner who saw everything. She made it her business to befriend the quiet ones. She never lost her grandfather's gift. She could see the patterns, the hidden motivations, the Trojan horses that people unknowingly, or knowingly, dragged into their lives every day. It was in the way a politician would promise a tax cut while quietly cutting funding for schools. It was in the way a popular brand would sell a beautiful idea of happiness while its factories polluted a distant river. She saw it all, and it weighed on her, but it also fueled her. She graduated from Sterling Prep as valedictorian. In her speech, she didn't talk about success or ambition. She talked about listening. Power, she told her classmates, their young, hopeful faces turned up to hers, does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it is hidden in a footnote, in a single line of code, in a quiet act of courage. The world will tell you to be loud, to be bold, to make your mark. But I ask you to listen first. Listen to the people no one else is listening to. Find the truth that is hidden in the noise. And when you find it, speak, even if your voice shakes. Arthur and Sarah sat in the audience, side by side, tears streaming down Sarah's face. Arthur simply watched, his heart full of a pride so immense it felt like it could lift the entire auditorium. Lily went to college to study history and international law. She had her pick of any university in the world, her tuition paid for by a grateful billionaire. But she chose a small, unassuming college known for its rigorous ethics program. She wanted to learn not just how to win, but how to be right. One summer, she returned to intern at Sterling Enterprises. She wasn't given a fancy corner office. At her own request, she was placed in the archives, a vast, climate-controlled basement filled with the company's history, decades of contracts, memos, and forgotten documents. For weeks, she did nothing but read, immersing herself in the company's past. It was there, in a dusty box labeled Acquisitions, 1970s, that she found it. An old, faded contract from a hostile takeover attempt that Arthur had fought off early in his career. And in that contract, tucked away in the boilerplate legal language, was a familiar, chilling phrase: Asset Realignment Protocol. The trap Marcus Thorne had tried to set was not his own invention. He had stolen it. He had found a weapon from Arthur Sterling's own history and had tried to use it against him. Lily brought the document to Arthur. He stared at the yellowed paper, his mind drifting back across half a century. He remembered the fight, the fear, the feeling of being outmaneuvered. He had won then, but he had never understood exactly how close he had come to losing everything. He had never seen the soldier and the horse. All these years, he whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. It was right here, my greatest vulnerability, and I never even knew it. He looked at Lily, his eyes filled with a new level of understanding. You didn't just save my future that night, did you? You understood my past better than I did. In that moment, the last piece of the puzzle fell into place for him. He knew what he had to do. On the day of his retirement, the boardroom at Sterling Enterprises was packed. The air buzzed with speculation about who would be named the new CEO. The smart money was on a handful of seasoned vice presidents, men who had spent their lives climbing the corporate ladder. Arthur Sterling, looking regal and calm, walked to the podium. He thanked his team, his partners, his employees. Then he smiled. Succession is not about finding a replacement, he said. It's about finding a successor. It's about finding someone who understands not just the business, but its soul. Someone who understands that our greatest strength is not in our stock price, but in our integrity. He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the anxious faces in the room. For years, I looked for that person among you, he continued. But the truth is, I found her a long time ago, in a hotel ballroom. She was 11 years old. A wave of shock and disbelief rolled through the room. I am leaving this company in the care of a trust, Arthur announced, his voice ringing with absolute authority. And the sole trustee, the person who will have final say on all major decisions, the person who will be the guardian of this company's future and its conscience, will be its newest board member, Ms. Lily Grant. He turned and beckoned to Lily, who stood with her mother at the back of the room. As she walked forward, a young woman now, poised and calm, a hush fell over the boardroom. They saw the quiet girl who had grown up in their midst, the intern from the archives, the colonel's granddaughter. They saw the future. Lily didn't make a speech. She simply stood beside Arthur Sterling, a silent promise. She would listen. She would watch. She would protect this company, this legacy, that a cruel twist of fate had made her own. Her life was a testament to a simple, powerful truth her grandfather had taught her. The real fight is never the one they show you. It's hidden in the quiet details. And sometimes, the most powerful voice in the world is the one that dares to whisper, "Don't sign that." Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive stories.